Strong leaders, they don't confuse commitment with stubbornness. And today, let's just go back to the date of April 13th, 1970. When the facts change, you have to update the plan. Resourcefulness, it begins when you stop asking, why don't I have what I need? And start asking, well, this is what I have. When leaders become calm and specific, they give people the solid backbone to just follow and see what needs to be done. You don't need to spend today trying to solve for the next months. Solve that next problem, make the next decision, take that next step, and then look at that next situation again from a new position. All right, let's go. If you're tired, not feeling fit, tired, just not having the focus, tired, just not having the life that you deserve, this is the place to be. I'm Jason Yarusi, and today, let's just go back to the date of April 13th, 1970. 3 astronauts, Jim Lovell, Jack Swigert, and Fred Hayes, were traveling toward the moon on Apollo 13. This mission, it had been planned for years. Thousands and thousands of people had just worked on it, and just every major step calculated, tested, practiced, repeated. Then approximately 200,000 miles from Earth, their crew heard this just giant bang. Warning lights, they began flashing. 2 of the spacecraft's 3 fuel cells were lost. Oxygen was escaping into space, and the command module was rapidly losing electricity, water, and oxygen the 3 astronauts just needed to survive. And at that moment, Swigert contacted Mission Control. Houston, we've had a problem. Right then, the mission had changed. The goal was no longer just arriving and landing on the moon. The mission had just completely changed to just bring 3 people home alone. This was that first critical decision. NASA could have remained emotionally attached to this original mission, right? Years of work had gone into this lunar landing. Careers, reputation, national pride were all involved. But at this moment, none of that mattered. The conditions had changed, and so the mission had changed. This happens so frequently in our lives and in business, is that you create this plan and all of a sudden something changes. The market changes, a deal it falls apart, an employee that you spent months training or had been with you for years leaves, you get injured, your family needs you. Strong leaders, they don't confuse commitment with stubbornness. Commitment means we stay dedicated to the ultimate purpose, right? The ultimate purpose is that we want to land on the moon. But the stubbornness would have been that we are willing to sacrifice lives. And in most of our lives, right, it's that we don't have to make a life and death situation. But we spend so much time trying to stay on the course when it's like there's construction on the road and you need to take a detour. When the facts change, you have to update the plan. The command module Odyssey was losing power and oxygen, so these astronauts moved into the lunar module Aquarius. And in this Aquarius, it had been designed to support 2 astronauts for approximately 2 days on the moon. Now it needed to support 3 astronauts for about 4 days, and that lunar module became a lifeboat. The solution was already attached to the spacecraft, but it had been built for a different purpose. In a crisis, we often focus so heavily on what we lost, and ultimately we overlook what remains. We had this great sermon at church the other day where we spend so much time focusing on sin instead of putting our sights on Jesus. And when things are going bad or we're in a bad place, putting all of our intention into something ultimately just continues to bring us into that, right? We're so focused on the drinking problem we have, or the pornography problem we have, or the marital troubles we have, or these other things in our life, right? If that's where all of your focus goes, your intention draws you closer and closer to it. When in fact, you don't have to have all of the right answers in front of you, but you have to just understand is that maybe you don't have to have the expectation of what the budget is, but you still have to have the relationships, right? Maybe you did lose an employee who was very capable of her team, or maybe an injury just stopped you from competing in that race that you had put so much time into, or just even competing and just having your normal routine. But is there another way? Is there another way that you can train, right? Without that employee, is there a way to better look at your practices and see if that employee was overlapped, or just even harden your process for the future to make it a better employment position or just a better company to work with, right? If you've had these things in your relationships, right? Is there a way that you can look at what has been the failure in your past relationship and how what's available now is something that you can hold on to for the future? Resourcefulness, it begins when you stop asking, why don't I have what I need? And start asking, well, this is what I have. What can I do? And what can I make the most of? It's always remaining resources that we have to look at and say, how can we build upon this? There's so much lack in our life, but ideally, if we look at it that way, then we always feel unfulfilled. But if we look at just the amazing world we live in today and all the resources that come from us, it's almost impossible to feel like you're ever lacking. Then, next here on the spacecraft, they had this carbon dioxide became accumulating inside that lunar model, right? And the spacecraft had enough lithium hydroxide canisters to filter the air, but the command module used square canisters and the lunar module used round openings. I mean, can you just imagine all of these things, right? You plan for everything that could go wrong and all of the things and all of the questions. And what happens, right, is that you don't think to plan for sometimes things that can go so sideways that you don't even fathom in your mind are possible. In engineers on the ground here, they gathered the same materials available to the astronaut to develop an adapter using plastic bags, garbage, cardboard, and a suit hose and tape. And then in mission control, they talk the crew through the construction process, right? Think about it. You have to say, okay, what is available and what can we do to make this right? It wasn't just complete anarchy saying, oh, everything has failed. And guess what? It worked. NASA data shows that the carbon dioxide level fell from 14.9 millimeters to mercury to approximate 1 after the improvised system was installed. They didn't have the perfect equipment, right? They built a workable solution from what they had. So many times, many people, they reject that imperfect solution while waiting for this ideal one that just may never arrive. I see this all the time. When we're working out, you got to get the right shoes, or in business, right? You don't have the right website, or you don't have what you say is the right agreement, right? And in a crisis, that first answer does not need to be beautiful. It just needs to be safe, useful, effective. You have to solve for the function before the appearance. It used to be, you would see people put off going out there and starting their company until they would get their business cards made, right? Or having a website, right? Instead of just going out there and saying here's my idea. Can I find a customer? You have to reduce that problem, right? You have to reduce the number of problems in front of you. And Apollo 13, they still had just dozens of challenges. The crew, they needed to conserve water, preserve power for the battery, just reentry, just getting home, and correct its course. Manage the cold, restart the command module that had been powered down for days. And if the crew could just have emotionally tried to carry everything at once, what happens? It's overwhelming. I talked about trying to run 100 miles and put an end to my mind instead of just trying to conquer that 100 miles in a series of just small races, something that I could mentally prepare for because I had never done 100 miles at once. When you do that, right, when you try to solve everything at once, it ultimately seems impossible. Mission control, they separate the crisis into individual problems. What threatens the crew first? What must be solved next? What resources does it require? Who has the best equipment equipped to own it, right? Who would be this best person to go and drive forward with this operation? Then they work through the sequence. That's, again, how I accomplished a 100-mile race. At mile 20, you don't solve for mile 87, right? If at this part I am having a bad rash at mile 20, or my shoes, my socks are wet and my feet are getting beat up at mile 20, I'm not worried about mile 87. I'm worried about right now. What is happening now? Is it my hydration, my nutrition, the pace, the temperature, the next aid station? What do I need to do right now to stop the overwhelm in the time and the moment at hand? You write down every problem and you look at your greatest immediate risk, solve it, and then reassess. Again, in life, there's problems. And if you're an entrepreneur, I hope this hits home, but the bigger problems you solve, the more important your life will become. Because 1, you'll feel like you're making progress, but 2, you'll be helping in a way that adds value, not only to yourself, but others. You don't need to solve everything. You do need to solve that most important next problem. What happened in the end here is Apollo 13 returned safely after a flight lasting 5 days, 22 hours, and 54 minutes. The capsule splashed down approximately 1 mile from its predicted target. And that result was not produced by just overwhelming panic. It was produced by people remaining focused enough to make good decisions when the stakes were overwhelmingly and increasingly life or death high. Calm doesn't mean you're just unconcerned. Calm means that you refuse to donate your decision-making ability to the problem. When leaders panic, right, and you can see this, I'm sure in your life, you've been around people who panic. that uncertainty spreads. It goes to everyone around you. And very few times does that help. When leaders become calm and specific, they give people the solid backbone to just follow and see what needs to be done to make the most of a situation that's gone sour. You think about this situation in your life, and currently many things feel overwhelming. But if you just ask yourself 4 questions, right? And you can put them back to just this lesson here. Has the mission changed? What resources do I have? What is my greatest immediate risk? And what is that next problem that I can actually solve? You don't need to spend today trying to solve for the next months. Solve that next problem, make the next decision, take that next step, and then look at that next situation again from a new position. Apollo 13 never landed on the moon, but because a team accepted reality, adjusted the plan, used what it had, and solved one problem at a time, 3 astronauts came home. The original mission, yeah, sure, it failed. The great-term mission of just life and making sure we had survival massively succeeded. I can ask you you take action today. And one action you could take for us, go out there and share this episode. Share this with someone who needs to hear this message today, to understand that there's problems all around you in life. But when you begin to look at them as your way to find solutions, life changes for you in the better right now, today. All right, that's what I have for you today. This is the Live 100 podcast. I'm Jason Yarusi. Let's do this.